Okay, so topic 2.4, this is going to be one of the more important topics because we're going to be talking about membranes for the remainder of this unit. First of all, what is this thing that you see right here? You should be able to identify this. I'll pause and let you guys think about that. I should have said this is a phospholipid. Right, you'll notice that because it's a phosphate group on the top. It has these lipid fatty tails down here that are just carbon and hydrogen. This is a phospholipid. The top, go ahead and tell me, what do you think? Hydrophobic, hydrophilic? We're talking about this a little bit. I'll pause and let you guys answer. Label this hydrophobic or hydrophilic. Should have said hydrophilic. This head is hydrophilic. You'll notice there's a lot of those elements that cause polarity, things like oxygen and nitrogen, which make things very polar. What about the bottom here? Hydrophilic, hydrophobic. Well, there's only one answer to that. You should know that these are hydrophobic tails. Long chains of carbon and hydrogen. Not a lot of polarity, no oxygen down here, anything like that. These are hydrophobic tails. These are phospholipids. These are going to be, be arranged in a bilayer, right? In a bilayer. Which you'll see on the next slide here. This is the phospholipid bilayer. So, why is it called a bilayer? That's because, as you might notice, there are two of those phospholipids here. Again, which section of this? Go ahead and label these in your notebook. I recommend you draw a bilayer here. And go ahead and label both sides of this. Are they hydrophilic or hydrophobic? Are they polar or non-polar? Tell me that as well. I'll go ahead and pause and let you guys do that. Okay, so these tails in here, as you probably put, because we put them on the side, these are hydrophobic tails. They are also non-polar. The hydrophilic head over here, however, is polar. The reason these phospholipids arranged like this is because, as we remember, and as we'll get you, this will probably get you through a lot of chemistry right here. If you know this, like dissolves like. We've talked about this multiple times. Likes something that is non-polar, likes other stuff that is non-polar, and wants to kind of face that direction. Stuff that is polar likes other polar things and likes to face that direction. That's why these phospholipids kind of organized like this with a hydrophobic interior, right? Hydrophobic interior and a hydrophilic exterior. Hydrophilic exterior. So, this is a plasma membrane. Now, of course, this is the simple model that you probably have seen many times before. You've probably also seen something like this as well. This is the fluid mosaic model, or it more accurately looks like the fluid mosaic model. Fluid mosaic model comes from these, it simply describes the fact that cell membranes are fluid. Cell membranes are fluid-like. Also, that cell membranes have a mosaic or a large variety of stuff embedded in it. Right. So I'll go through some of these examples that I do kind of want you to know. First of all, you've seen this phospholipid, right? We just looked at this on the next slide. You'll notice that there's these things called glycoproteins. These are proteins, these blue portions, these blue globular things here are proteins. Glycoproteins are, and these are used a lot for cell signaling, cell identification. Glycoproteins, this is a word I do want you to know. You should notice these roots, right? Glyco sounds like glucose, that's sugar, right? That's carbohydrate, and proteins. It's a combination of a carbohydrate and a protein. And they've kind of these proteins are kind of embedded in here. These carbohydrate chains kind of come off of them. Glycolipids also exist. There's lipids that are embedded in this cell membrane. So a glycolipid is a lipid with a carbohydrate attached to it. Protein channels. This is something I want you to know because we're going to be talking about these quite a bit. These are, if you'll notice, they have this little hole inside these proteins, right? these proteins to allow stuff to kind of travel through this channel in or out, depending on what it is. You'll find a lot of cholesterol as well. This is a molecule you saw when we talked about molecules, or we talked about biomolecules earlier. Cholesterol helps to give the membrane kind of these fluid qualities to maintain flexibility. It helps to give it to some stability in the structure. You also have all these other types of proteins, these control proteins that are inside of this membrane, embedded in this membrane. This word embedded up here. Embedded proteins is typically what they're referred to when they are embedded in this membrane. But it's important simply for now for you to know that there's many different types of proteins that exist inside of this cell membrane in many different shapes and sizes. There's also these glycoproteins and glycolipids, which exist. We'll talk a little bit more about those probably in some later units, but for now, know that this is the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane. It's not as static as you kind of see it. And even here, it looks like a picture. So I guess on the next page, it should kind of clarify kind of what this looks like, right? If you'll notice, this is the phospholipid bilayer in here, the PLB, the phospholipid bilayer. And you'll notice that it is kind of fluid, right? It moves quite a bit. This is kind of a graphical rendering of what these proteins might look like embedded. Notice that the loop is very short on this, but you can see some of these molecules being traded off between these other integral or embedded proteins, right? Some complexes are coming together. This is kind of the action that's taking place in your cell membrane. It's a very lively place. It's not this kind of picture perfect place that we look at when we look at photos. Here's another kind of less wild image down here, but it shows you some of these protein channels and the way they let stuff in and out, right? In and out of this cell membrane. So I just wanted you guys to kind of see what the fluid mosaic model means. Understand that it's a lot more complex than just the phospholipid bilayer, right? Know that there's a bunch of stuff embedded inside of the membrane and that it's moving. It's moving quite frequently. It has a fluid structure. Even these proteins are kind of moving throughout this membrane, all over the place, right? So I think I'm going to leave it there for plasma membranes. We'll talk about these quite a bit over the course of this unit, but this is just kind of a brief intro to it. Okay, thanks for listening.